Ready? Yeah. Good evening. I'd like to call the North Augusta City Council study session from March the 11th, 2024 to order. And this time, I'd like to turn it over to our city administrator, Mr. Jim Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 3 items to cover here in open session. One is the review of next week's city council meeting. Second will be department details. And third will be a focus item for the capital project sales tax 5, which we'll talk a little bit there, although we've had a decent amount of discussion during the offsite. So with that, if I could, we'll go into the council agenda for next week. Under old business, we'll have under administration ordinance number 2024-05, authorizing the sale of surplus city property at 1711 Plank Road, second reading. And again, this was to re-advertise the sale of this property through GovDeals, and because we did not receive the minimum floor bid, which we set at $17,000 based on that county tax map for the first reading. So this was passed on a first reading, and this will be brought to you again for second reading. But I'll pause for any questions, or unless Kelly's got something to put in there.
I'd just throw something in there just because we were looking at the tax valuation, and this property, although it has value, it's from a tax sale because we got it from the Forfeited Land Commission. The title can be brought up perfectly, but it may require whoever buys it to bring a lawsuit to quiet the title. And so that's one of the reasons why we're not possibly getting bids along the line of what the original appraisal was for. So it may just take them another year before they can actually get it cleared so they can get loans and financing on the property.
Thank you, Kelly. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, we'll move into new business. Under Planning and Development, Resolution number 2024-11, to authorize the city to enter an amended and restated master parking facilities operating and easement agreement and certain joinders. This will be the subject of one of the executive sessions for this evening, so I'm not planning on discussing this at length here in the open session. What I would say for council and for our viewing public, this document in draft form was published on Friday as part of the study session notes, so it's available for anyone to see or to review. And then depending on the guidance we get from council, we may make some amendments beyond that this week, but it'll have to be finalized by Friday for the publication within the city council agenda. Moving on, we'll have under Finance Resolution number 2024-12, identifying North Augusta projects for the Aiken County Capital Project Sales Tax 5. I'll cover this during the focus item, so I wasn't planning on talking to this item here during the agenda. And last but not least, under Capital Project Sales Tax 5, under Finance, Sales Tax Commission appointment. I know the mayor had already discussed and openly who the city's appointee was going to be to the county's board, but this was just finalizes that and at least has a public record of that announcement. So I'll pause for any questions or comments from the council. Hearing none, we'll go into department details. And Jamie, I'm going to kick it to you to read it off.
First up for department details is finance.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Quick update from Finance. We will have a Cycle 2 due date on Monday, March 18th, and our Cycle 1 disconnect dates will be March 19th and 20th. Thanks.
Next is public services, Jason Sykes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as you know, we're in week 2 on every week collection for our curbside recycling program. So we're kind of kicking that off. We're getting a lot of good feedback. Just right now, currently we're running about 31% participation. So we expect to see that to move up as we're doing every week. And so that way they'll be able to take and put, and it'll be easier to carry that recycle since we're putting it out every week and not having to put it every other week. So we're just moving towards that, but everything else is going pretty well. Got any questions?
Thank you, Jason.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it, sir.
Okay, and next is Planning and Development, Tommy Paradise.
Mayor and council, we're going to have the planning commission next Wednesday, March the 20th, and we're expecting a full agenda that evening.
Public Safety, Chief Johnson.
Good evening. We will be doing a promotion pinning ceremony on Thursday at 3 o'clock at the Public Safety Hut to honor our recent promotions that we've had at the end of last year and the first of this year. Also, last week, we submitted a federal grant for $1.8 million to get a new ladder truck, the same one we put in for last year. And our command staff will be the featured speakers this week at the North Augusta Chamber of Commerce breakfast on Thursday morning. Yes, sir. What time's the pinning ceremony? I want to say it's at 3 o'clock.
And Junior, one more problem.
Yes, ma'am.
This lady said that, and we go back to True North, the traffic, she said coming out of Savannah, Barony, the traffic this Sunday was backed up, coming into the church now, not going out. You know, the other was, but I didn't know if the police some way could let the people in Savannah, Barony get out. She said she had to sit there for a good while before she could turn on to Martintown Road.
Okay, we'll pass it along and monitor it this coming Sunday.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilwoman, I'm glad you brought that up because that will actually be one of the items we'll discuss in the focus items tonight for CPSD 5 funding.
Next is Parks and Rec, Rick Meyer.
Good evening. We're ready to start spring sport. Right now, girls softball and soccer will start the week of March 25th. Baseball, if the uniforms are all done by then. And the second item I have is to remind you of a ribbon cutting event for the Greenway, Sidewalk, and Restroom at Hammond Hill Suburban Club. It is next Wednesday, March 20th at noon. This is the restroom that North Augusta Ford has contributed for us to for our Greenway users.
Rick, just one question. I didn't get a
Yes.
chance. Somebody's late sent me. Notice it said the water fountains on the Greenway, they are not, are we having some issue with them not working? Or?
Yeah, we're fixing to cut them back on now.
Oh, I thought it was the winter.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we cut them off in the winter so they don't freeze and break. Yep.
Thank you.
Up next is Carl from Tourism.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. A couple quick hits for you. The Women's Amateur event, as you know, is coming end of this month, 1st of April, and our role this year is going to be to greet, as we traditionally have done. And they've asked us to participate in the closing of it with our partners at Green Jackets. Ladies are going to be attending a game there on April 6th. And also received word that we're selected for the 2024 South Carolina Dakota Conference, which is a cybersecurity and tech conference. 200 attendees from across the state and a few in Georgia. And we're selected out of 3 or 4 sites they visited. And we're in similar position for another one. We'll receive word for that in April, about a conference coming in October.
One question for you.
Yes, sir.
I noticed we have 3 poles that actually can hold banners in the municipal parking lot. Have we ever had a conversation about maybe putting some banners? I think there's 3 of them.
Okay.
I never noticed them before until literally Sunday. I saw, and I just was going to throw that out at you.
Sure. I have not, but we can certainly look into that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
If we got extra banners, I mean.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, up next, Engineering and Public Works, Tom Zeser.
So we have been approved by the SCDOT to install parking lot or parking space stripes on Carolina Avenue as requested by Lookaway Hall. So beginning tomorrow, Streets and Drains crews will start putting those lines down. Basically, this is just on the east side of Carolina Avenue, essentially from the point of Calhoun Park and Georgia Avenue up basically to the back property line of Lookaway Hall. Other than that, we do have a sinkhole on a storm drain on Bolin Road, at 1910 Bolin Road, between the road and the Greenway. Streets and Drains crews will be working later this week to repair that sinkhole.
And what happened about John Phelak, when he came about shutting from Georgia and the Carolina West Forest, did we do anything? I noticed this weekend they had a big event, and I guess they got.
That hadn't been done yet.
No, but they had put cones, and I presume that was okayed by the police, and they were parking on the street. But I'm like him. I think that little road needs to be shut off and used for parking. But so we hadn't done anything about that or looked into it.
It's a process, but we're going to move in that direction, the steps, but we haven't yet.
We're going for the easy one first, Councilwoman. It actually is a lot harder than it sounds to be able to stripe on a South Carolina road. So we're going to call that as our win for this week, and then we'll continue to look and see what can be done for the street. But that's going to be a much more.
That's been what, David, since he asked for the original 2 years ago. I just want us to drag our feet on that for him.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, and lastly, Ms. Kayla Ferguson, Human Resources.
Evening, Mayor and Council. If you look on your department details, on Friday, we are doing our Sheila's Day, so if you'd like to go get a free pastry and a drink of your choice, you're welcome to. And, of course, our employment opportunities on the back. We're getting pretty short, so we're excited.
That's great.
Thank you all.
I think that covers all for department details. Subject to any questions from council, we'll go ahead and move into our focus item. If I can get those slides up. So as we're working on the slide deck now, as a reminder for the council, this presentation you have is going to be just an overview. Obviously, you spent somewhere in the neighborhood of 5-6 hours of getting department briefings and updates on capital project sales tax requests. And there were somewhere in the neighborhood of $90 million worth of requests and significantly less than that. We made some edits. We got some council input and then some subsequent council input. And so what you're going to have here today is really just the finality of that. Again, we can still take council input after this session, but just wanted to show you where we are at today. And our intention is to move forward to have a resolution for your consideration next week to present and be voted on and then sent to the county, which essentially is the formal action between the city and the county of which projects we would like to have included on the ballot initiative. And there'll still be other steps that will happen between then and the actual ballot referendum, but this will be part of our application going forward. So next slide, please. So as a reminder, this is the overall projected tax rates for collection rates for the various municipalities and for Aiken County as a whole. And as you can see, they're highlighted on the far right side. Is $48,633,586.13. Pretty exact number, which is pretty awesome. But that's the number that we have, and so that's our planning target as we've gone forward and looked at the number of projects. Next slide, please. So again, this is the timeline that we're looking at that was published by the county. We have a city council meeting on March 18th, which is next Monday, and so that would be the last formal opportunity we have to meet that deadline. We have had some discussions with the county that there would be an opportunity, if required, to slide that date, but our impression right now is that it would be better to hit that target and get it moving into the county so they can consider that. And then as you see, there's a number of work sessions that will have to occur. Our city attorney advised me that as far as the public hearing, that's done by the county, not by the city, because this is a county referendum and initiative. And then this will go through an ordinance reading process at the county this summer, and then will be considered on the general election ballot in November of this year, which is a presidential election, so would be expecting higher than normal voter turnout. Next slide. So what we have here is based on some of the inputs that I have and some shaping from our elected officials and staff. I'll just run down the list, and you'll see this twice in there. So I'm going to show you what we have. We're going to highlight some of the projects, and then we're going to come back to this list. But what you have here is prioritizing the country club property as the number one to get us out the gate for that project. Number two being the downtown development improvements, then into parks and rec with park improvements. So as you can see, we have a very high initiative on parks and rec early in our CPST. That includes beautification down into number 4. Then we'll start getting into some of the other items. Public safety comes in at number 5 with the replacement of the apparatus, and we did that by design with, there are some apparatus that are tied to a new station at Station 4, but we all want to replace the existing trucks that we have now before we even get into the new station, because some of those are really well beyond end-of-life stage. Barntown Road traffic study implementation and Councilwoman Carpenter, that would address one of the issues you talked about, which is the traffic coming off of Savannah Barony. Right now, there's no really great solution for that until we figure out how that either gets signalized or gets tied in through knob cone. But ultimately, that's going to be an expensive endeavor, and that's where we have that laid out.
It is, but do we need, and I presume Junior said that, like somebody monitoring that on Sunday, like you might have to say, Martintown stop, Barony come out.
What's changed is they've been doing it for years. I mean, what happened this past weekend? I mean, but this is them coming in or leaving? So they are they're on both lanes of Martintown going toward I-20 or packed all the way around? Savannah Barony. Oh, Savannah Barony, okay. Nobody would open up the letter? I can't believe that from a bunch of church people. We need to call the church. I'm sure you know, find out what's wrong with them folks up there. David, what's wrong with you folks?
Well, if Junior, if y'all can just Sunday see, could it be a one time? The way she talked, it's been several times. Yeah. Well, we had. Yeah, but if you're trying to get to the hospital for a patient. Yeah, well, that's what I told her. We got and everybody sort of got the same time getting out. Yeah. But we had someone here, a few weeks ago about coming out of True North, making the left, but she's talking about making the right. Yeah. Oh, you can't?
They have to come to my street.
Well, I'm a clown. You sell donuts or something out there? Maybe that'd be a good thing.
But I mean, it is a little bit of an inconvenience for 20 minutes on Sunday when all we're leaving, because they all come through the colony and come up there and come back out.
When a citizen tells me something, I pass it on.
Next item on here is the automated meter reading system. So for the new homes that are going in to North Augusta, those are compliant with this automated system, but we have thousands of homes that requires a very manual process to do that, and so this would allow us to fully move to a modern system here within the city. Through a county request and our discussion with the county chairman, they had wanted to partner with us for Nancy Carson library improvements, so that wedges in there as well. We have money set aside for the Riverview Park Activity Center, and just to note, that's separate from park improvements. So park improvements are for the outdoor aspect. So when you look at the 4 parks that are listed there, that would cover any number of things from playground equipment to splash pads to shade sails or whatever else. Those are for outdoor items. The Riverview Park Activity Center is for the facility itself. And so potential replacement running track, if they wanted to do Wi-Fi in there, if they wanted to do improvements. So this isn't adding to the activity center, but it's life cycling and improving the things that are already there in the activity center. So those are two separate lines in there. And then rounding out this top 11, we have road resurfacing and road reconstruction. Next slide. Stormwater system improvements, moving into the camera system and associated upgrades, Fire Station 2 upgrades, Carsville historic area improvements, the tourism facilities and assets, and we have that grouped together. So we took trolleys, the community center, the Palmetto Terrace, any of the facilities that we can rent, along with signage and wayfinding as part of that tourism facilities and assets that would be lumped together in that item. Greenway connectivity, and then water, then wastewater infrastructure improvements. We've got a large wedge in there for the Fire Station 4 design, along with the trucks and apparatus. When you look at that price tag, you can say, well, how did we get to this kind of number? And then obviously Fire Station 1 was a little over $3 million. That did not include the apparatus cost, and I don't believe that included the full land acquisition either. So when we look at this $7.5 million, that's for the whole, acquiring the land, doing the design, doing the build, putting at least one apparatus into that station and potentially two, because I could certainly see a need for, the basic need is for an engine, but based on what we're seeing with I-20 and going down from 3 lanes to 2 lanes right there at exit 1, I think we're going to have more wrecks and more rescue truck requirements at that intersection, probably more than most other places. We have a wedge in there for just under $2 million for the Public Safety Training Center, and then we lastly have money out there, and that dollar amount there, number 22, is incorrect for the public safety replacement handheld numbers. That should be, I believe, $500,000. So I'll amend that going into the next iteration. Next slide. So really, this is just kind of a high-level wave top on some of the things that we talked about at the offsite, and really more for the viewing public, for them to be able to watch. Next slide. So this is a diagram of the country club property and some of the items that the parks consultant came in and talked about, what was in the art of the possible. And again, we still have time to work through what it is going to be at the end state, but the $3 million gives us the ability to do at least a couple of those components moving forward and coming right out the gate. And there are going to have to be some partnerships to do some of the larger scale aspects of this. So when we look at the potential golf course or potential swimming pool, those are partnerships that we would have to be pursuing, and the money that's in CPSD 5 is not meant to conduct those activities, but it does get us out the gate with pickleball, with some of the track items and outdoor areas that we've requested. Next slide. So these are some examples locally of some of the regional park playground equipment. On the far right there is Langley Pond, and that's a very popular playground here in Aiken County. And so again, that's a high bar, but a good bar to look at for future playgrounds that we may want to life cycle here in the city. Next slide. Same thing with splash pads. I think we all know that it's a rear guard action that Parks and Rec has to do to keep the 2 splash pads that we have up and operational. The guts of those require a fair amount of tweaking to make sure they're going to operate on a daily basis, and they're both approaching end of lifespan. So we're going to have to do something to either refresh the infrastructure or to do a full replace. But we certainly recognize that August in North Augusta is crazy hot, and the kids need someplace to go. And until we get some kind of partnership with the pool, that this is the next best thing that we can provide the citizens. Next slide. And then here's a picture of the existing Creighton Park playground equipment, which is more akin to the playground of my youth, which is metal. So at the end of the day, we'd like to have something that's a little more user-friendly for the kids, and especially as this is in our downtown corridor, one of the areas we'd like to take a swing at to make sure we're going to upgrade this into a better posture for the kids. Next slide. So there's a potential look at what Creighton Park could be based on some of the feedback we got from the consultants. Next slide. Summerfield Park, again, this is the overall concept that was pitched. I don't believe there's enough funding in the current line of CPST 5 to do all of these things, but there's definitely funding to do a number of the items in there as we go forward. And so ultimately, the splash pad would probably be the number one thing to to get after there on the list, but there are a number of other things that we can do within that line item to make Summerfield Park a better destination park for our kids on that side of town, near the North Augusta Middle School. Next slide. And there, as we've talked about, the splash pad definitely needs an upgrade. I mean, when we look at the two splash pads in town, Riverview Park Activity Center definitely has some maintenance challenges, but Summerfield is the one that requires the most amount of downtime to get back into compliance. Next slide. So Activity Center, we've talked about it in a number of open sessions about it, and citizens have brought to you a request to redo the track. The track surface is definitely due to be redone, and there's some different options out there as far as services, whether it's carpeting or other more modern services that could be used. And then same thing with the weight room that we have there. That's starting to show its age. Next slide. And you can see some of the items that's starting to look a little bit like a deployment gym. So it's could definitely use a little tender loving care going forward. Next slide. So with downtown, next slide, please. So this is taken from the North Augusta Forward Downtown Development Study. This doesn't show necessarily all the Georgia Avenue traffic improvements that we're planning on doing with CPSD4, but that will be a multi-year process. But as I looked at downtown, based on the guidance that we got from mayor and council members, we're going to try to hit some of these high points here on the left-hand side. So, we're going to get a good chunk of the traffic calming accomplished CPSD4, at least we're going to try to, but there's still going to be other elements of traffic calming that need to be accomplished along with pedestrian safety, which will elude us on CPSD4, so CPSD5 is the way we continue that along. There was a line in CPSD4 for utilities undergrounding. The way it was written was for Georgia Avenue, but if you look down Georgia Avenue, I didn't see a lot of requirements for utilities undergrounding, but when you get into the alley systems, that's where you start to see a lot of lines that are above ground that could certainly be undergrounded. Amenities is certainly something that could be covered here within the parks. And then also lighting. You all have mentioned how much, well, I'm not sure if you're telling me you enjoy it or don't enjoy it, but how bright the lights are on Bluff Avenue, and that would be good to have that level of lighting inside the downtown corridor itself. So that's one of the projects that could be used there, along with expanding public parking and potential property acquisition, depending on what the direction is from the council on moving the downtown Greenway connector. Next slide. Under Engineering and Public Works, next slide. So road reconstruction is one of the ones we'd like to do. There's road repaving and road reconstruction, and I don't want to steal Tom's thunder because Tom does a better job of explaining it than I do. But essentially, road repaving is taking an existing road and scraping off the top couple layers and just repaving that item and calling that good. Road reconstruction is where you're actually going beyond that and having to pull the entire base layers off. And in the way that Tom does it with his projects, he also ties it into some of the stormwater drains. So as you can see there's an older project with Woodlawn on the left-hand side of your screen. You can see the open ditch. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, as they did the road reconstruction, you've got curb and gutter, and you have a storm drain system in there, which is really better for pedestrians and also for vehicular traffic, so that people don't accidentally put their cars into the ditches and cause damage to their vehicles. Next slide, please. Here's another example, Bluff Avenue. I think you've all seen it. We haven't done the ribbon cutting yet, but you look at the way Bluff Avenue was just 12 short months ago, and you look at it today. Next slide, and you've got a much better look there. Having sidewalk, having curb and gutter. So again, we did Bluff Avenue not as actually a Greenway project, even though it does tie to the Greenway. We did that as a road reconstruction project, which is why that's currently listed as number 2 on CPSD 4. Next slide, please. Under public safety, some of the highlights there. Really apparatus. So there are 4 apparatus that are listed here for just under $6 million. The first and foremost is the 1981 ladder truck. When I first took this job, I thought, we had this really cool department that had a museum. That was not the case. This is actually a serviceable truck. They rolled this thing out on calls. And so ultimately, we're asking for a FEMA grant to replace that ladder. There's a match to that. But the likelihood of us getting that FEMA grant is pretty low because just about every municipality goes after a grant like this to replace a fire truck. So the likelihood of us getting any kind of grant money to replace that, in my opinion, is less than 5%. So we need to plan against being able to replace that through our capital project sales tax. So 81 would be the number one we have there. We have an 89 engine there on the bottom, engine 4. Again, it's a reliable truck for now, but the problem we run into with these older vehicles is replacement parts. So trying to find the pumper apparatus, getting tires and those kinds of things, we can do that. But when you start talking about the guts of the engine, when it's in the 80s, they have some significant challenges. And then the downtime for those engines becomes significantly longer, and that becomes a concern. We also have a 2005 ladder truck, which is currently good, but as we look at the long-term draw for CPSD 5, that ladder truck would be due to be replaced at the end of CPSD 5. And so what we don't want to do is put ourselves into another situation where we have a 40-plus-year-old ladder truck. Those are critical assets for us, and especially as we have taller buildings going into North Augusta with apartment complexes and commercial development, having a ladder truck and a functional ladder truck is important. And last but not least, we still have brush truck requirements. And again, that's a 1998 brush truck, so still pretty old and well beyond what the serviceable life is supposed to be. And that's a vehicle that rolls out from time to time and deals with brush fires, deals with things off the interstate sometimes. And again, it's something that we roll on a semi-regular basis out of Station 2. Next slide. Refurbishing Fire Station 2, not our best looking public safety facility by any stretch of the imagination. And so ultimately, what we would look at there is really the key thing we want to get after is the roofing. The roofing structure is a problem. And so we want to replace the roofing and not just replacing the metal. I mean, it's like the whole roof system along with the interior gutters evidently wasn't a great design. And so ultimately that needs to get replaced because they got buckets all over the place within that building to make sure it's not, getting all over the folks. But that's important for us, along with refurbishing the training room and indoor shooting range. So it's a refresh, not a redo there of that station. Next slide. The other thing we're going to talk about is Station 4, and where we envision Station 4 going is somewhere kind of in the corridor on Martintown Road between Exit 1 and Knobcone. That would be ideal. And so as Chief briefed you at the update at the offsite, what you have there is the current fire coverage, and it's kind of backwards in that red is good, blue is okay, and green is bad. And green is definitely something we're trying to get after there at the intersection of Exit 1. So next slide, please. So if we ended up dropping a public safety station somewhere in that neck of the woods, you can see where a lot of the green becomes red, which in this case is good. And especially with the Hive development going in and also being close to our North Augusta High School. And then also some of the traffic issues we think are going to be coming with Interstate 20 as it next down from 3 lanes to 2. On our side of the river as opposed to in Georgia, I think we're going to see more accidents on the interstate, and it's going to be easier for the public safety department to respond to those from that location as opposed to coming from much further down Martintown Road. Next slide. And then really the key thing here under the training center is a lot on there, and I don't believe we're going to be able to get after all those requirements with the money. I think the fundamental requirement we have for the public safety department under all those things is really the burn building. And so we've done some initial research on that. We've had some dialogue with the county about potentially partnering with them and also about potentially doing it in-house. The way that this is presented is that both options are still on the table. But I think the key thing that we need out of this line is really the burn building for the public safety officers. And Chief's giving me the nod, so I got that right. Okay. All right, thank you. Next slide. So again, this is the overall list, and we'll be refining the resolution to make sure that all the numbers are accurate and gets us to the right numbers that we need to have. But what's really critical, at least for the staff and for me, is to make sure that the council is good with the projects, the way that they're listed, the titles, and we'll continue to refine this throughout the week. But if there's something that jumps out at you as being fundamentally wrong or is misrepresenting, your input from the offsite, please let me know soonest, and we'll make sure we get those items addressed. Next slide. And that's our last slide for this presentation.
Thank you, Jim. Got anything else? Okay. All right. So this is going to be a little unique. We're going to actually be doing 3 executive sessions. So I'm going to read the first executive session. I ask for a motion and a vote, and then we will do the same for the second and then the third, since we're not coming back here, okay? So item 4, legal executive session, request the city administrator in compliance with section 30-4-70. The city administrator requesting executive session for the purpose of discussion of matters relating to the proposed location, expansion, or provision of services, encouraging location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by the public body. Discussion specifically related to Riverside Village. Upon return to open session, council will not take any action on matters discussed in executive session. Do I have a motion to go into this executive session? Ms. Carpenter, is there a second? Mr. McGee, okay. All in favor? That is unanimous. And then when we finish from that executive session, we will then, I'm going to ask for a motion and second for item 5, which is executive session requests the city attorney in compliance with section 30-4-70. The city attorney requests executive session. 2, discussion, negotiations, incident to propose contractual arrangements and proposed sale or purchase of property, the receipt of legal advice, whether legal advice relates to a pending, threat, or potential claim or other matters covered by the attorney-client privilege, settlement of legal claims, or the position of the public agency in other adversary situations involving the assertion against the agency of a claim. Discussion specifically related to an amendment and reinstatement of the master parking agreement for Riverside Village. Council will not take any action on this matter discussed in executive session. Do I have a motion for this executive session?
So moved.
Ms. McCauley, seconds, Mr. Presnell, thank you. And then finally, we will then go into a third, item 6, legal executive session request of the city of. Oh, I didn't do that, thank you. All in favor of item 5? You know, I'll make sure you're awake there, Kelly. Item 6, legal executive session request of the city attorney, also in compliance with section 30-470. 2, discussion of negotiations, incidents for proposed contractual arrangements and proposed sale or purchase of property, the receipt of legal advice, whether legal advice relates to a pending, threatened, or potential claim or other matters covered by the attorney-client privilege, settlement of legal claims, or the position of the public agency in other adversary situations involving the assertion against the agency of a claim. Discussion specifically related to an amendment to the Master Development Agreement for Riverside Village and related economic development inducement agreement. Do I have a motion to go into executive session item 6? Okay, Ms. Carpenter, is a second? All right, Mr. Buck, thank you. Okay. All in favor? That is unanimous. How's that? Good. Okay, if there's nothing else, then thank y'all for coming, and we stand.